Thanks for joining the Legal Value Network's webinar, Right People, Right Seat, Building Multidisciplinary Matter Teams. My name is Brad Antisi, and I'm the Director of Strategic Pricing and Analysis at Butler Snow. And I'm also serving as a member of the LVN Education Committee. Before I introduce our moderator and panelists, let me say a few words about the organization that brings you this content. Legal Value Network is a growing community of more than 850 business of law professionals. LVN's board and numerous volunteers are all working together to bring the members curated content through a number of vehicles. One is webinars, two is the Council of Luminaries series. Number three is a monthly e-newsletter. We also have an Off the Hour podcast hosted by Justin Ergler and the recently published Legal Pricing and Practice Management Survey. LVN is also providing ways for this community to engage with one another through roundtable programs. Save the date, October 11th, for our members only roundtable. That's October the 11th. And also through its Women's Initiative Forum, which actually had a back to school happy hour just yesterday. This particular webinar is brought to you by the LVN Education Committee, which is comprised of 15 individuals who have been working for months to develop a full slate of educational offerings for 2021 for LVN members. The content's focused on three tracks: innovation, pricing, and LPM, and beyond the technical. Today's webinar is actually coming from the pricing and LPM subgroup. If you're not an LVM member, please visit legalvaluenetwork.com and select the Become a Member tab. Sign up today to ensure that you continue to enjoy all of the offerings. And be sure to follow LVN on LinkedIn and Twitter. Now, before we dive in, just a few housekeeping items. The only video you're going to see is that of the presenters. Everyone will be on mute except the presenters. Opinions and information shared here are those of the presenters unless otherwise stated. The session will be recorded and will be available soon after the event through legalvaluenetwork.com. Questions are encouraged, so please use the Q&A feature on the Zoom toolbar to post your questions. And finally, before I introduce our moderator and panelists, we want to thank today's sponsor, Fulcrum GT. Joining us today to tell us more about Fulcrum GT is Kofi Mundy-Castle, Fulcrum's Pricing and LPM Solutions Lead. Kofi, take it away.
Thanks a lot, Brad. As Brad said, I'm Kofi Mundy-Castle, and I'm the solution lead for matter management at Fulcrum GT. So Fulcrum is a solutions company as well as a product company. And through co-innovations with law firms, we've managed to build a strong suite of products covering end-to-end business operations of law firms. Our team's comprised of subject matter experts from law firms, including myself. I used to manage a pricing and analytics team. And now I product manage one of our solutions, Curo, which is a matter pricing and matter budgeting solution for your everyday pricing challenges as well as your LPM challenges, and includes quite a lot of functionality. Can't dive into it here, but it's worth checking out. Thanks a lot, Brad. Back to you.
Thanks, Kofi. With that, let's get the program started. Right people, right seat. Building multidisciplinary teams. Man, that is a mouthful for me today. Many of us have heard the saying, get the right people on the bus. But a very important thing is getting the right people on the bus, but get them in the right seat on the bus. And make sure everybody knows where the bus is going. A team assembled without proper task and responsibilities and without a shared universal vision may struggle to reach peak efficiency, even with technology and processes properly positioned to support them. As you may all recall from this from the LPM and pricing series so far this year, what we've done is we've taken a matter from the original origin of scoping it through budgeting it, through pricing it, and we're going to continue this process through our series all the way until we're at after matter review. So at this point in the game, right where we are is the matter's been scoped and budgeted. So what we're trying to determine now is how can legal departments, law firms, and business partners build efficient and effective multidisciplinary teams who collectively work towards achieving defined outcomes and a shared vision. So here to guide us on this journey today is our esteemed moderator, which each and every one of you know, I'm sure, Melissa Prince, the Chief Value and Innovation Officer, Chief Client Value and Innovation Officer at Ballard Spahr. Melissa, welcome and thanks for joining us today.
Thank you. So glad to be here.
Melissa is going to be joined by the following individuals. Kofi Mundy-Castle, who you heard from just now. He's Pricing and LPM Solutions Lead at Fulcrum GT. Emily Wesson, the Associate Director of Legal Project Management at Norton Rose Fulbright. And Greg Kaple, Senior Director, Legal Department at Kaiser Permanente Foundation. With that, I'm going to hand it off to Melissa to guide us through a conversation around building multidisciplinary teams. Melissa, the floor is yours.
Thanks a lot, Brad. Thanks so much for having me. So the first question I have is for Greg Kaple. Greg, I know that you run a legal operations team in-house. And so the question I have for you is, how do you approach building a multidisciplinary team, both internally and externally, understanding that that might involve teams of lawyers, professional staff, and others who need to support you?
So you want the truth?
I think we all do, yeah.
It's a little bit like, whoa, hey, over there, yeah, you come here, you know, because like it or not, a lot of projects start with some client request that is put in some generally innocuous form. Right? Can you just get me an answer? Could you just get something? We just need, you know, and before you know it, it's shoot, aim, ready, right? And I just say that in the reality of probably what we're all used to. I mean, we're operating in the business of law, which is a business of crisis response and risk mitigation. And so whether we like it or not, a lot of times the way teams initially form is in the kind of haphazard and crisis state that the old cliche storming, forming, and norming, you know, would maybe qualify as. The difference of what we've been doing at Kaiser is recognizing that while the stream flows a certain way and you can't fight the current, you can guide the ship down that river. And so the key is to start to recognize that second beat in the cliche, which is the forming. So once the storming has taken off and some clients requested something of some attorney, whether it be an executive level attorney or a counsel level attorney, or somebody's made a request for outside counsel, and you know, we know who exactly we want, or we don't know who we want, or we know we want to do it in an RFP, but we want it to take 2 days, or, you know, I mean, those are all the different kinds of examples that can happen. So once that kind of initial burst has gotten over, there are some official controls that have to happen on a project, especially if it's going to use outside counsel. So if it's going to use inside counsel, probably a little less disciplined or maybe explicit about how our team's being formed and solved, because it's up to those inside counsel, those clients, whatever paradigms or project managers they're doing. But if it gets to a point where we're going to engage outside counsel and it has to go through members of my team on legal operations and legal business solutions, then after that storming chaos has happened and we're at some place of shopping and evaluating outside counsel, maybe bidding outside counsel, maybe already having an outside counsel on our panel and engaging them, then typically what we do, and I would say it's not institutionalized yet, it's really done at kind of the highest value matters, the larger teams, the more complex work, is to gather around how the engagement agreement or the statement of work is being done, or how the matter budget is going to be prepared and reviewed, or how the vendor, the outside counsel, is going to be set up for billing and administration. And at that point of control, again, within kind of a reasonable expectation of what we're getting done with this audience and this level of maturity, is to stop and pause and say, okay, who's playing what? How do you expect this to be played? Maybe we don't go deep into the substantive organization detail, but we definitely go into the detail of who's the lead relationship manager, who's going to be responsible for the team of work, who's going to be responsible internally and externally for communicating back and forth and keeping up to date on work being done, cost of the work being done, those types of things. So I'd say more than ever before, we're trying to allow for the river current to flow and know there'll be that chaotic engagement period, often almost on everything, and let that just be part of the process. but then have a kind of light touch, not overly PMI, trying to make them charter it all out, but a light touch of kind of roles and accountability. And then, and I'll expand on it maybe further in our discussion, as you go through the life cycle of the matter, and as you're maturing tools and capabilities to run good teams, you come back in and check in and say, how are we working out? Is this what we expected? Do we need to make changes? Maybe for my internal attorneys, now that you've done 2 or 3 of these, is there a different way we want to approach the 4th one as we start up and build the team to try to help be more effective at working together? And I do believe, and part of the reason why we do emphasize this bump of a pause is the effectiveness of the team is everything. If you field a hockey team on a baseball field, don't be surprised if they don't know how to pass the ball around, even if they're professional athletes.
And Greg, in my role and previously when I was a law firm, I didn't necessarily get to speak to the client as much as I'd like to. And I'm interested to know, kind of from what you've said, when you have these projects where you're engaging outside counsel, do you kind of get involved on a legal ops perspective and kind of are involved in the day-to-day running of the matter, or do you leave that to your attorneys inside?
So in general, it's left to the attorneys out of traditional circumstance. In more specific vision of transformation now, our larger cases are getting more of the attention of the legal ops group to help support the setup and the structure. So one great example is the big bet the company litigation that we have right now. I actually have the time to meet with that lawyer that heads that litigation up every week. We have a multi-framed plan of what we're doing, one of which was she's very particular about how she organized her team. And it's between law firm, reviewers, experts. And she was very particular about how she structured the work plan, all of which is non-ABA, time task code standard. So she was grousing on how law firms and experts have to enter useless time and it prepares useless reports. And so, it's not like I'm trying to get in and be the project manager for her on the case and say, make that person do that work. Don't let that person do that work. But we are there in the way now, more case specific, saying, well, we'll set these reporting structures up. We'll set these systems up. We'll set these up because you are interested in managing a team and doing it in a way. So in those cases, we are becoming more involved. And I see that spreading from the biggest cases down to kind of the next tier, and then figuring out kind of a light way to make that available in some service desk support model or some templates to kind of the multitude of cases for any attorney or team who wants to take the initiative to do something,
So my question is that I started out my career post legal, or in business as a legal project manager, and Emily is a legal project manager. How often in your role as the lead in legal operations are you directly interacting with people like me and Emily and with Kofi in his former role?
Yeah. In my desire, it would be nearly 100% of the time, whether it be legal project management or legal biz dev. I mean, let the lawyers do the lawyer work. When I was in telecom, I didn't have the engineers come in and do the sales, right? I didn't even have the architect do the implementation. The limiting factor of how much we get to interface with legal project managers is first, how much are they available with the service provider? Maybe 20% of our service providers are going to have that role or are going to have that function. Second, what priority are they deployed to work with us and in what role? Because when I see them often deployed with a priority to work, it's really glorified system setup, guidelines, compliance, not real, what I would call project management. And so somewhere between those first 2 things kind of hits the third factor, which is, I use the analogy, when I go to AT&T Mobile, I get the dashboard with the per gig and the per minute usage, whether I ever want to look at it or not. I get it. It's there. It's part of the way they do business. They hope I use it. Maybe they don't. But it's there. I don't come in like 6 months after I've subscribed and go, why can't I log in? Oh, you didn't go set it up and you didn't tell us you wanted it. And we didn't know we should have scheduled a meeting with you. No, it's just, that's what the service is, right? And so even when there is a project manager available, even when they've got some capacity and they're not just guidelines, it still seems to require the impetus or the initiative of me or my team to say, wait a minute, let's get together. Please set us up on that tool. Please give that. So unfortunately, what happens, Melissa, is we end up working a very small amount of time with industry professionals like your roles because of that kind of cascading issue. Like, where is the best use of the time? And we're finding one or two of those places to happen. And that's why I'm out in groups like this to try to encourage and work with you all who understand it, you know, and can do it better.
I love that. I love what you just said so much, because I think that you're right. I think that we need to be proactive, and that's where I think that it would be awesome to involve Emily in this conversation. Because Emily, I always think of legal ops roles and these LPM and pricing roles on the law firm side as going hand in hand as partners in crime, so to speak. Emily, do you want to talk a little bit about your role? And I think one of the challenges that I've seen a lot is that lawyers sometimes don't choose the right teams, both in terms of skill sets and in terms of diversity. And maybe Emily can talk a little bit about how she forms teams and how she works directly with clients to make sure that she kind of inserts herself into the process a little bit.
Thanks, Melissa. I mean, I just want to touch on a couple of Greg's points too, because I totally agree with you, Greg. And the way that our team is structured is we have 4 legal project managers, and 2 of them are former attorneys, and 2 of them have a different background. And the unique, part of their role that they're very proud of is that they're all client facing, because that's where the magic happens. And you're right, Melissa, it is a bit awkward to tell an attorney, here's how you need to manage your matter. They've often spent 20 years cultivating that relationship. So for someone in a non-lawyer role, I hate that term, but someone who is not practicing in that role to come in and say, this is how we're going to staff it, takes a lot of, emotional intelligence and a lot of kind of influencing and a totally different skill set. So when, to answer your question, how do I staff a matter or a client? It really depends on the needs of the client or a matter, because our team does manage client portfolios as well as manage and scope matters, as well as the culture of the partner. I mean, these are just, I'm pretty practical about what will work and what personalities will work together. And, we change if we need to. And just on your point, Greg, earlier about storming, forming, norming, I think that's really important for the audience to hear, because sometimes if you're in the storming phase, people might say, oh, we've got it wrong, but actually that's a completely natural progression and it's going to happen. And I think just knowing that will take a bit of the pressure away from the people who are, staffing and controlling this. Know this is part of the cadence, it's part of the process. So stick with it. And another kind of really practical thing that we do too when we're organizing these multidisciplinary teams is, I agree with you, Greg, light on all the traditional project management templates, but very simply a RACI chart. We're pretty big on those. It's often our team that does bring everyone from the lawyers to the legal assistant to the billing team to whoever it is across the board together. And we say, okay, here's who's doing what. So everyone knows what they're doing. We're pretty big on roles and responsibilities as well. And kind of the one key tactic I'd suggest to the group, if you're kind of envisioning this and you're looking to hire or create a team, especially with internal recruits, is focus on the role and not the person. I've seen a lot of people say, well, this person's great. Kofi, I'm going to pick on you. Kofi's awesome. Everyone likes him. We're going to put Kofi into this role, because then you're building a role around Kofi's skill sets. And if he doesn't like it, or if he leaves the organization, you don't have a clear defined roles and responsibilities for that role, which is just not good practice. I see that happen a lot. There's an impetus, especially with these newer roles in the industry, to say, well, we're really like this person, but I would really caution against that, because you're going to create problems for yourself in the future. One other thing I'd add, Melissa, is that we're very client-focused mindset at our firm. So when we're staffing matters, that's kind of what it's about. And I find that's helpful, because when you have multidisciplinary teams, everyone's got their focus, right? Whether it's someone from finance or the client or the partner or the LPM or pricing member, that's kind of their vertical. But if you have something unifying, such as the matter, the project, the client, it helps everyone be on the same team and create that, we're all rowing in the same direction kind of atmosphere. So I'll stop there.
So,
Can I just?
oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, Melissa. No, I was going to say, and yeah, thanks for picking on me, Emily.
Anytime.
And I was going to say to it, because it sounds like kind of the stuff you're doing is probably at the forefront in terms of that client engagement and kind of being able to make those calls on matters. But I imagine it's hard as an organization to get there, right? Because generally partners have the most influence. How do you get your kind of team to be able to call those shots? Is it really strong leadership at the top, or kind of really interactive partners? And what would you recommend if a firm, to somebody watching and their firm's not necessarily like that?
Yeah, it touches a bit on what Greg said about actually empowering your people to speak with the clients, because then you're seeing partners see the value, see the admin burden that they're not having to do. You're building the trust so that everyone has a seat at the table and everyone's talking to everyone, and there's not these kind of silos that shouldn't be there. And another kind of tactic I use when I'm onboarding a new LPM who has to make those relationships with clients and partners is I really look for curiosity, almost on a pathological level. Someone's described it to me that when you're recruiting, you want someone who sees a thread on a sweater and is pulling at it. What about this? And especially from a client standpoint, why are you pursuing this deal? What's happening for you? What's keeping you up at night? To truly understand the client, and also with respect to data. Why are we trending this way? What's happening with this matter? So someone to be very, very curious. And the reason that's such an effective tactic, Kofi, is because lawyers want to talk about their work. That's their subject matter. So my LPMs, we're not all lawyers, and we're certainly not all subject matter experts in every area of law. But if you're curious about the matter or the client, you have a connection immediately, which will help you kind of bridge that gap and create that stickiness that you're kind of referring to, Kofi.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks.
So I have a question for you, Greg. So I have I have a wide variety of skill sets on my team, and I know that that's the direction that lots of law firms are going. This whole client value concept, and so the concept is it's the life cycle of the matter, which involves a bunch of different skill sets, and so you may have data analysts and technical people and LPMs and pricing folks. What do you do to take advantage of the breadth of the skills that are on the teams in the law firms you're working with? And I know what you've already said is that we should be reaching out to you.
There we go. So you say the breadth of the skills, and you're thinking about your organization that has a fairly mature group with a lot of different resources. Now, I'm down with this theory, this strategy. In fact, I am not a lawyer. I should be full disclosure here. Never have been, never will be. Can argue with the best of them. But I come from a background of telecom and technology and consulting and professional services. And the hypothesis I had when I came to Kaiser is you can create more change internally at the law department by using external service providers than you can actually trying to just change internally. I've worked in legal long enough. I'm not sure why I thought this would be a correct hypothesis, because when I got in-house 7.5 years ago and began to have the attention and focus on working with legal service providers, whether they're ALSPs or they're law firms, what you find is they don't really have the resources to tap into and take advantage of. They have them for legal substantive expertise. They've got one dimension of the resource that me as a client of a service provider want. They've got expertise. But do they have service delivery? Oftentimes, no. They don't have project management. They don't have process improvement. If they do, the lawyers aren't bought in. It's not embedded. They don't know how to work together. Now, you're asking me, okay, well, what about beyond that? What about some data analytics? What about some operational process improvement? We're like, whoa. I mean, I love the idea. And I will say I found a very narrow slice of the world that's allowed for it. And we went out over a year ago to do an RFP for M&A in healthcare, which is a very specific finite group of professionals that have the experience and the cachet to work with our CEO of an $84 billion company to do healthcare M&A. And most of them are dyed in the old wool of tradition. My rate is high and I bill what I bill and you just deal with it because it's M&A, right? So how are we going to get high level M&A experience, but at an affordable nonprofit healthcare kind of rate. And so the RFP was premised on emphasizing innovation and diversity more than expertise and cost. And what we have found along the path of the last year working with 3 firms is 3 varying degrees of how much we can tap in and leverage resource. So one firm, we're tapping in and leveraging a lot of their legal project management, their real-time data analytics, their dashboard tools. We're both having to put a lot of co-creation in on it. I'd like a little bit more from the firm. Another one, once they get burned enough, we've been coming to the table and doing more of it. They've opened up a little bit more of their data analytics group, maybe a little less of the project discipline than the other group has. And then the third one, I don't know, a lot of promises in the RFP and still waiting to see some of the results. So if that's at least in the segment of healthcare M&A kind of indicative that, in our population, we can find 1 or 2 that have some of the capability, expertise, and the willingness, and we actually have some of the capacity and time to tap into, I can tell you the result has been we have gone from an average cost of a deal being $1.5 million to under $1 million, that we have a gated approach so that we're not wasting a bunch of time on deals that don't actually go to closure. We're cutting them off at 200 and 250,000 in kind of strategic spend as opposed to 500 and 600. So as much as it is a small fraction of where I have the opportunity to tap into those resources, Melissa, where we have done it, I think has made a demonstrable difference. In fact, my GC is really quite proud of it because all of this goes directly to the CEO. So the CEO sees the spend, sees the results in a very direct way of branding what the legal department does. And he's very proud of the fact that even though we're kind of thrashing all over on what kind of deals we want to do or if we'll do them, we've been able to have 3 of the highest end professionals here managing in a way that's almost 3 times more affordable than it's been for the last 3 years.
I'm sure that you're not surprised to hear me say this, but a lot of times I feel and I know that Kofi and Emily probably feel this way too, and I'd like them to chime in about this, but I feel that what I need is the client to drive the need to use our teams, because we have, from the top down, there's a huge amount of support that's coming for development of innovation and client value and pricing and LPM and all these things that are so important to changing the way law firms do business. But when you have multiple partners that are your boss and there's a differing, I guess, partners differ in terms of the support and the, that they give the teams, like sometimes clients like you need to say to the partners that you're working with that you need these resources.
Yeah.
And so I'm sure that will change over time, but
and unfortunately it needs to be done in a full RFP on kind of full brand new business, not legacy business. I mean, those are dynamics that help. And unfortunately, it's usually a client like me, the legal ops non-lawyer, who's having to say it, even if my lawyer client is kind of not saying it and poo-pooing it. And so there's an issue there where we need to unite. Like what Emily said, I mean, a house that's not united is not going to get anywhere. And being able to unite where we had a partner in this first firm who's very much willing to give it the shot. And once some results started happening, guess what? My lawyers loved it. And then they started asking for more of it. And now that one particular firm, even though they're a premium high-end priced firm, has grown more business in the last 60 days than any one firm in our entire organization. And why is that? Because lawyers are passing it around to their friends saying, hey, when you sign up with this firm, their team and Greg's team take care of all this stuff, and you can use a really high-end firm but not worry about the cost. So go ahead and try it. I mean, that's the virtuous cycle I'm hoping to get to a bigger tipping scale.
Yeah, I agree with you, Greg. And wearing my law firm hat, I think it's on the law firms to be proactive after you sign that engagement letter, whether it's a matter or panel. That should be, whoever LPM, legal ops person, whatever kind of person is at the firm who's responsible for that, should be following up proactively. It shouldn't be on the client to reach out. And, if you need to build in kind of a process, because I know that project managers love their processes. One thing that we have as a template for kind of the infrastructure when you do have a new client engagement so that you don't miss anything, right? something as simple as cross-referencing. What did we say we're going to do in the RFP, and are we doing that? And follow up. So I just want to add, I think it should be on the law firm there as the service provider. You know, if we take legal away and just go back, Greg, to, you know, your previous work with an industry, because law firms obviously are trying to, you know, we take a lot of inspiration from industry and how things can be and how they should be in the future. I think that it should be for the service provider to kind of close that loop.
I think it's in the service provider's best interest to close the loop. In fact,
Yeah,
you know, as a previous salesperson, hush, I said it out loud in the room. I was a salesperson. I kind of really still am. The number one technique you're taught is how to say no to a client, how to disqualify bad clients, right? So I say, whose interest is it in more to do a budget? Is it me as an internal department to have a law firm to do the budget so I can manage with finance? Is it more in my interest? Or for the law firm partner who wants to be able to forecast revenue and assign resources, whose interest is it in more? I'd say it's actually more in the partner who's on the revenue side to do the budget. They should go to a client and say, I'm not going to work with you unless you do the budget. I'm not going to work with you unless you let me do project management. Because if you don't, you're going to ruin my business. Right? Imagine if the scales tip that way. Sorry, go ahead, Kofi.
Oh, no, that was good stuff. I think what I was going to say was, what do you say to say, like, back in my time as a pricing person, I remember kind of being involved in that modeling, building the budget, doing the pricing, and then kind of getting to the beauty parade stage or the pitch meeting stage. And you get there, you've got kind of all these topics to discuss. And then as a client value person, you kind of do a lot of the talking and you impress the client, all goes well, you win the work. And then that's it. That's all you hear from it. As a pricing person, you just kind of, oh yeah, you helped win the pitch, you're over there now. And sometimes you don't even hear back. So I guess this one's probably more towards you, Melissa, and you, Emily. And how do you force that issue when potentially the partners can just push you out of it once you've done that initial piece?
So
be happy that you played your role.
Yeah, exactly.
So we're talking about right person, right team, right? Hey, hopefully you did the right thing. You know, they didn't want to let you know otherwise, so hope it worked.
So what I was going to say is that's really how this whole concept for me of like this client value team approach was developed, because I started out in LPM and I felt like I didn't know really what was going on in pricing a lot of the time. And by the time I got involved, I had to insert myself into the process to get people to want to work with me rather than being involved at the beginning where, you know, that's where all the action happens. And so they really go hand in hand in my mind. You know, a good LPM, and I'm sure Emily can talk to this too, is involved from the very beginning and is working to put together a diverse team of resources that are the right skill set and developing a budget and working with the pricing team to get everything approved. And then once the matter is underway, the LPM team then knows what's happening with the matter. And then that's where like we worked for years to try to develop how to monitor and track matters and budgets and things. And we figured out that you can't have enough people, enough boots on the ground to be able to manage every single matter in the right way. And so you have to have technology. And is there technology out there that can help you to track things in the right way? Recognizing that sometimes matters don't get opened properly, people aren't entering their time in the right way. And so you need someone who's like a transitional person between LPM and the technology to make sure that everything's happening so that you can report on it from a data perspective. And so I believe strongly, and this goes back to the concept of having a multidisciplinary team, but you need all of the varying skill sets to make this work on the law firm side, regardless of if the client ever even knows that this is happening. You know, and to Greg's point, to Greg's point, what I would love is to be able to just give each client a dashboard every single time have a client portal. And for every matter that's open, say, here, client, here it is, look at it in real time. You can see the diversity of your team. You can see how many hours and fees are worked. You don't even have to ask us what's going on because it's all being entered into this system. And so that's where I think things are going in the future. And I think And you need multidisciplinary teams to be able to do that, because just having a pricing person or just having an LPM person is not enough.
Yeah, agree.
Yep. And in that RFP for M&A, I explicitly set expectations. Hey, as we go through this, you're probably going to need a pricing person. But as we get done with it, you're probably going to need a project management person. And as we go throughout doing new matters together, you're probably going to pull your pricing person in, your project. But that's for you all to figure out how and who to run that team. Not me. Not me to coach you. Not me to put up with the fact you don't have a player and don't know you're missing a player. Not the fact that you had the player on the bench but decided not to call the player in. That third firm that I mentioned, which is kind of the slower performing one on innovation, they started off early with a pricing guy. Pricing guy almost turned into the project guy until I finally was like, is there a project guy going to come online here? And like 2 months after the fact that nobody came on, a project person showed up. And they were totally disconnected from the pricing person. But it all doesn't matter, because really one of the things I found is it really gets back to when we say teamwork. We're oftentimes chasing technology and process to make up for the wrong team. And so why is that third firm performing the way they are? Well, we've broken down to using some different personality assessment tools internally around building our teams at Kaiser. And I've been experimenting on how you can use that with outside counsel and how you're building legal teams. And by God, it's sure as night and day. That, you know, some people are built to be team leaders, and some people are built to do new, uncertain, innovative things. Other people are built to be kind of conservative issue spotters. Guess what the majority of lawyers are built to be? They're the conservative issue spotters, not the team managers, the team builders. And so this partner, who is by far one of the best minds in healthcare M&A, is and most likely of a personality type that makes him very good at the writing and the Q&A and the checking it off, but makes him very skeptical and hard to adopt new things. Now compare that against the partner at the firm that's really performing really well. Well, both are business law partners. We can't say this is litigation or regulatory kind of personality styles, right? But that other partner's got more of that personality style where he's got some willingness to try things out, much more willing to delegate. So he brought a innovation leader in at the start who had a pricing person help, who then has a project person help, who then has a technology person help. And as a result of the partner's buy-in and probably personality style, where he's more of a player coach, he's more of a Pete Rose, right? Than somebody who's just learned it through script and as a coach. So now you see the difference there. Now, what I would say is, how interesting could it be if we started playing Moneyball like Billy Bean, and we started looking at the players on our teams according to different variables of expertise and teamwork, instead of it just being on your resume and your law degree? What if we were looking at some quantifiable way about, you're a great glue, you're a great issue spotter, and you're a great Captain America. So we're going to have you be Captain America, and we're going to have you cover as left Frank and issue spot, versus how many times would those teams maybe be flipped and you got the issue spotters leading it and Captain America's making copies? I don't know. I mean, you know, that's where I think if we could get to some tools and some patience between clients and providers to stop and value how much an ounce of prevention and team building leads to a pound in value. And I'll leave you with the last example. This was not a law firm team, but it was a consulting team doing legal work for us on legal hold. We used these assessment tools. We overspent time on the first 6 months of business planning and lining the team up. And the end result was we finished the project a month early and 25% under budget. And I only spent a half an hour a week monitoring the project. That wasn't because of the beautiful process, the wonderful approved technology. It was because we had 9 baseball players playing baseball every day, and the opposition was trying to field soccer players, and we just ate their lunch.
So Emily, this is a good segue into discussing, you know, some of the management related stuff you have to do in your role. What do you do if, like, mid-matter, you have soccer players playing on a baseball team, and how do you manage the chaos, you know, in working with the lawyers that you're in charge of kind of partnering with to kind of right the ship, so to speak?
Yeah,
Just before you start, Emily,
yeah, go
to
ahead.
clarify, it's football, not soccer.
I'm loving the
Fair
sports
enough.
analogies, by the way. I'm loving it. No, I think you're right. As a team lead, you have to know who's good at what. And that's why you need diverse teams from all aspects of that. I have someone on my team who's very good at process improvement, someone else who's very detail oriented, someone else who's very kind of commercially minded. And I need all of those skill sets. I can't have someone just with one, they can't all be the same. And one thing we do as a group, if we're stuck on a problem, is we bring it to the group. If someone's stuck in them, I say, ask the group. And inevitably you have more ideas. But to answer your question, Melissa, let's say a matter is kind of going off the tracks. Often LPM normally we're there from the beginning. We have a kind of a 4-quadrant life cycle. We're there from the initiation, the scoping stage, to opening, planning the matter, to management, to closing. So we are there from the beginning. And I agree with you. It's much better to be there from the start, because then all the nuances from the beginning, from the RFP stage, that is really hard to kind of translate after in terms like a handoff. So if we get brought in to solve like a problem matter, this actually happened to us last year. We had someone on it from a different team, not from my team. And that person just didn't have the skill set, no fault of their own. But when it got brought to me, there was a lot of kind of negativity around the matter. This just doesn't work. It's just too hard. It's so complicated. And so I listened and I put someone on. I looked at the matter and said, it's super analytical. So I put someone on with an accounting background. She's very comfortable with data and numbers. It didn't freak her out. And within a few weeks, she had kind of right-sized it. So I said, what was the difference for you? Like what changed? Because I got one message and then you seemed to just magically, make it work. And it was that she was a CA. She was comfortable with numbers. This was her skill set. It didn't freak her out. The previous person didn't work with data and analytics. It was like this, scary issue to solve. So that's why it is so important to look at the skill sets on your team and the issue and say, right, this is going to work here. And if I have someone on where it's I need some kind of coaching, I'll pair people up on purpose with totally different skill sets so that they can learn. So it's one person can teach the other person so that we can get the task done, but that person still feels supported. So those are just a kind of few of the practical tactics I like to use in my team.
So there was a really good question that came in through the chat that I think is worthy of us exploring because it's a real life question. So the question is, you're a law firm and you have hundreds and thousands of matters. And Emily, you have 4 project managers. I have 4 project managers. How do you decide which matters you're going to engage people on and which matters you just can't? And then what do you do about that?
It's tough. So like Melissa, I'd be curious to hear how you approach this. I'll go first. It's hard. We've got tons of matters and we'd like to be on every matter. We have a bit of a tiering structure, kind of based on the client, a little bit about the matter, kind of risk factors. So we use that loosely, but a lot of this is actually caught by the fact that our team manages client accounts and portfolios. So the firm's major clients, we have an LPM assigned to from a kind of account portfolio standpoint. So they'll know about the big matters or the kind of trends where they need to focus on, and that's part of their portfolio. So it's kind of caught that way. But again, automation through reporting. The reason, like I always say to the partners, the magic is not the report. It's the conversation you have about the report. So if I send a report to a partner or a client that's giving them, a snapshot of their matter, they can have a discussion about like, is something out of scope? Do we still have the right team? We thought we would have 30% partner time. It's now 50%. Why is that? Are we, the law firm, just overworking the file, or actually did the scope change and we do need more partner time on this? It's just a mechanism to have a discussion. So that's why repetition of reporting and visibility of stats on the clients and matters is really important. You and Greg both talked about dashboards. I kind of want to hone in. It's not just the dashboards that's important, but it's information to have a discussion overall. That's what the data is there for. So I'll hand it over to you, Melissa, about kind of how you deal with this staffing conundrum, because you're right. There's never going to be enough people for the amount of matters and work there is to do.
Yeah, so we very much approach this situation the same.
You went on mute.
Sorry about that. So I was just gonna say we very much approach this situation the exact same way. And there are never going to be enough people if we're using people and not process and technology to solve the problem, to be able to address all the issues that arise. And so we try to do the best we can to empower our legal teams to have tools and resources to help them manage their matters. And for the really big ones, we get more heavily involved. And so Emily, you're absolutely right. We set up dashboards, but the dashboards are intended and client portals that help us manage the matters, but they're intended to kind of document the process and to bring the legal team together so that we're seeing all, so it's a place for everyone to come and see what's happening. And a lot of times our associates in the past didn't know that there were, for example, budgets, and they didn't know enough about the responsibilities for each person on the legal team. And so using technology and process helps to make sure that everybody that should know what's happening knows what's happening. There are obviously some partners who are really good at managing their matters and some that need a little extra help. And we also know who those people are. And we're having conversations at a higher level about staffing and about budgets and things to help keep things on track. But it's definitely a challenge. And I think we have to rely more heavily on technology and process going forward, because you just can't, it wouldn't make sense to staff, a team with 20 project managers, and some would do a better job at managing the projects than others. And so, and imagine being the person that's in charge of managing all of those folks. It's just challenging. And so we have to think more innovatively as law firms, for sure. Greg, I don't know what your thoughts are. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, I do. I think that it all gets back down to this people equation, right? If I hire an attorney who has substantive expertise, grew up with a family of entrepreneurs, the culture of that person may be more open to some business principles of collaboration and teamwork. Was that on the resume? How explicitly was I thinking about whether or not I needed that skill set, right? But to the point that Emily made, the fact that the skill set had the accounting background and maybe some other cultural twists made all the difference. All of a sudden unlocked 80% capability. So you're right, the old industrial way of thinking about scalability has never really fully worked with people, right? We have infinite demand, we have limited people. Some of them may really know how to perform at maturity level 3 or 2. But in the end, how do they all get along as a team, right? If I've got a team of lawyers who are open enough and a little cross-trained and their clients need a certain kind of support, they don't need the project manager, right? To your point, the dashboards, well, I don't care if I have 100 dashboards because now I have 100 passwords I can't remember. I just want to know whenever I show up and meet with that attorney, they're going to have the dashboard and they're going to pull it up, and the agenda is going to be the dashboard. How hard is that? But for that attorney to have the ability to do that, they probably need some team member, right? That is either on your team or is a junior associate or is somehow making sure that dashboard's available for them to make it dance with me, right? And then, yeah, there's gonna just have to be some prioritization at some point. I think the challenge you guys are describing is oftentimes in legal, we don't have a global PMO structure. And so all deals can be good deals coming into the firm. And when everything's a priority, nothing's a priority. And so sometimes I feel like when we're working between the chaos of a partner in a firm and the chaos of an attorney in this corporate legal department, which by the way, we don't price for our services to our clients, so they're free. So you want to talk about infinite demand and bad multitasking. I mean, we, the client, are the source of it. We just let it roll downhill to the external. So I think a little bit of this goes back to that salesmanship of how do you control at the beginning what you're willing to do or not? And based on what you're willing to do, what do you then staff as an appropriate team? Maybe we're willing to do the $1 million project with project managers, but not the $100,000 one. Okay, can you be sure when you run the $1 million one, you got the right project manager so it's not extra overhead? And maybe it's not a problem. You can't do it on the $100,000 one because you got a 3-person lawyer team, one of which is open to project management and technical, and every time they show up to a client meeting, they bring the dashboard up. I mean, that's the multitude of strategies that you guys have to face and trying to figure out how are you building this in and adopting it so that when I buy from you, I don't care if it's 100 or 1,000,000, I'm getting that right sized kind of ability. And probably behind the curtains, it's happening because you've got a couple different team members playing a role rather than just a lawyer, a partner, of counsel.
I think, Greg, you touched on something as well that Melissa did about staffing and how do you meet those needs. And Melissa, I really like that you said you try to empower the attorneys. We do the same because we want to create a data-centric, fiercely client-centric mindset. And the only way you do that is so that the lawyers don't think that it's just, the LPM pricing finance team that need to care about these metrics. Everyone needs to care about them. And it's also demystifying, which is kind of the example I had before about perhaps someone who comes into this role with more of a lawyer background who just isn't used to numbers and analytics. It seems like it's scarier than it is. So demystifying it on purpose helps everyone think about these metrics, which in turn helps the firm and helps the clients. It's everyone's kind of, issue to care about and think about. And I'd also say we're talking about assigning the right people in the right teams. We've talked a lot about the business services side, but I just want to quickly say we need to be intentional about who we engage on the practice side. Oftentimes the partner wants to be the person engaging with my team or the pricing team, but you actually need the associates and the paralegals and everyone on the team. So, a very simple example is sharing the budget. When we come up with the budget and we start tracking it, I tell my team, send this to everyone on the team, even if the partner doesn't explicitly say so, because it's not fair to the associate who's going to be doing the majority of the work, who doesn't know that I've budgeted 20 hours for them to draft a pleading. That doesn't help anyone. That doesn't help the partner meet the budget. So it's just little tactics like that about being thoughtful, intentional, but like who needs to know this information? What makes sense? Because otherwise you're trusting that the partner's going to flip it. And we don't know that they will. So again, it's kind of like you're creating structures, Greg, at the beginning in silos that aren't helping the greater good. So there's little things like that anyone can kind of include everyone on it so that everyone has the information and is kind of equipped and empowered to own their piece of that, especially on the lawyer side, the practice side.
I feel like I could talk to you guys forever about this. So much good stuff coming out because I was like, I have 9 more questions, but we are ending nearing the end of the hour. So I guess we're going to have to come back again for hour 2 at some point. Let's start with Kofi because we've been talking a lot, me, Emily, and Greg, the last few minutes. What are some of the takeaways that you'd like to leave us all with today?
I guess kind of throughout the conversation, we keep coming back to the technology side of things, right? So I think a key takeaway is kind of being able to kind of meet those demands with technology and having kind of technology which is broad enough or it's usable by everybody in the team. So we keep saying, look, these teams are really multidisciplinary. Sorry, that's a mouthful. And they're very diverse with kind of analytical people and kind of legal people. So having tools which are able to cater to everybody and having tools where somebody like Emily can pick it up and just have a conversation about it. So yeah, I think kind of key takeaway for people listening is check out the technology and come to Fulcrum for it. Nice little plug in
Fair
there.
enough. What about you, Emily?
Yeah, I would just say really quickly, more on the staffing side, I would say be very honest about what your firm needs, what your team needs, and be a little bit ruthless about focusing on that. Make it not about the person and about this is actually what we need. It might mean you have to make some tough decisions about your current team, but think of what you actually need to be successful, and don't be afraid to be bold and make those moves in terms of the skill sets you really need.
Very helpful. Greg, what about you? Thanks so much for being honest from the client perspective. I think it's very important.
I'd say, the overarching theme is don't swim against the current even while you're fighting City Hall. Right? Because the idea is you should observe the environment you're in and find the way that it works and then insert yourself in ways that are going to be effective. So for instance, don't try to make staffing and teaming the explicit focus when you're in the storming phase. Let everybody storm and get that energy out of them, and then make a control point that pauses everybody at the forming phase. and gives you a chance to think about it. And just as one use case example, what is something that captures the lawyer's imagination, gets them into doing budgets and staffing and spend management, and they don't even know they're doing it? And that is diversity. And so we found, as we put some of our initiatives into our diversity and impact spending programs, we get a level of attention and concern and willingness to pause on staffing and budgeting because it's a diversity driven narrative. And now you open up and say, well, do we need more than just black, white, and brown diversity? Do we need, a project manager? Do we need a data analyst? Do we need to have some associates to help leverage the partners? So by finding the current, finding the pause, and then finding the narrative, you can have a lot more success in this very challenging environment. And I think if all of us took the pause and used a little bit of diversity, we'd find how important diversity is to really driving core value of legal service delivery, because that diversity would drive better teams. And let's face it, somebody picked up a rock and a stick and started playing baseball before they made a Louisville Slugger and a Jerry Jones Stadium. The technology and the processes, the rules, it's all after the fact that the people play ball. And we just want to help them play better. So find the pause, find the narrative, and let's play ball together.
I could not agree with you more. I think the last thing I was going to say was something not so eloquently said that was very similar to what Greg just said, in the sense that we've been talking about both lawyers and staff in terms of multidisciplinary functions and teams. And I think in future of legal, it's going to become even more important. Because obviously you can staff business teams with really exceptional people that have all the soft skills you're looking for, but you need the lawyers to be involved in the process as well. And it's going to require lawyers to think more business-mindedly than ever before. And so as we're selecting our lawyers, the lawyers have to be more than just exceptional lawyers. They have to have all the skills that we're looking for in our professional staff. And I think that's what we're going to see going forward. But yeah, really, truly. So I just want to thank everyone for coming today. This has been an excellent conversation. Thanks to the audience for being here. At the end, you're going to be prompted to fill out a survey. You'll also receive an email to fill out a survey. Please do, because LVN cares a lot about the content that we're presenting, and getting your feedback on what we're talking about is really helpful to us in terms of shaping future programs. Thanks again for joining us. Everybody have a great day. Hope to see you guys.
Thank you, Melissa.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot, everyone.
See ya.
Cheers. Bye.